The Gilded Age was the era when Americans practically invented the summer vacation, at least for those who could afford it. Newly wealthy industrialists and socialites left the sweltering cities each summer and flocked to extravagant resorts or built lavish summer cottages by the sea and in the mountains. In an age before air conditioning, the goal was to escape the heat and socialize with one's elite peers in cooler climates. The result was a constellation of fabulous Gilded Age resort communities all across the United States, from the cliffs of Newport to the peaks of the Adirondacks, from Midwestern lakeshores to California's oceanfront. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're exploring the ultimate Gilded Age summer getaways. Hit that subscribe button and let's dive into a special episode of This House. Newport, Rhode Island was the undisputed queen of high society summer resorts during the Gilded Age. This historic seaside town became the summer playground for America's richest families, the Vanderbilts, Astors, Morgans, and more. They built palatial mansions along Newport's cliffs and bays, pointedly calling them cottages in a tongue-in-cheek way. In reality, these cottages were massive estates designed to rival the grand palaces of Europe. For example, Cornelius Vanderbilt II's breakers boasted 70 rooms, a 50-foot ceiling-grade hall, marble imported from Italy and Africa, and every technological marvel of the age. Newport's mansions, designed by famed architects like Richard Morris Hunt, were showpieces of Renaissance palazzo and chateau-inspired architecture dripping with gold leaf and marble. Life in Newport during the summer season was a whirlwind of balls, dinners, and lawn parties. For about 8 weeks each year, the Newport elite engaged in grand social competition to outshine one another with lavish entertainments. One notorious example was the dog ball, thrown by society hostess Mamie Fish, where over 100 pampered pups dined on a multi-course meal alongside their formally attired owners. Such over-the-top affairs drew criticism in an age of stark inequality, but they were emblematic of Newport's excess. Status was everything. Who got invited to whose ball, whose daughter stacked an aristocratic fiancé, whose cottage was the grandest on Bellevue Avenue. If Newport was for seaside splendor, Saratoga Springs was the inland hotspot of Gilded Age leisure. This upstate New York town combined healing mineral springs, a world-famous horse racing track, and grand hotels to create a mecca for the wealthy each summer. In the late 19th century, Saratoga was known as the Queen of the Spa Resorts, where high society came to see and be seen. Each August, Saratoga's Broadway bustled with flowing silk gowns, jewels, ostrich plumes, white tie and tails, a veritable parade of wealth and fashion. Saratoga's attractions were many. By day, visitors took the waters at the town's numerous mineral springs, believing the fizzy, sulfurous waters cured everything from skin diseases to heart trouble. Whether or not they did, it was certainly a fashionable ritual. In the afternoons, all attention shifted to the Saratoga Racecourse, where thoroughbred horses competed and fortunes were won or lost at the betting windows. Saratoga's track, opened in 1863, became America's epicenter of horse racing prestige. Each evening, the action moved to lavish dinners and gambling at the splendid Canfield Casino, where Europe's finest champagne flowed and roulette wheels spun under gaslit chandeliers. The scale of luxury in Saratoga's heyday is hard to exaggerate. Consider the town's grand hotels. The United States Hotel had 768 rooms and a 3-acre landscape courtyard. Its dining room ceiling soared 26 feet high. Its sweeping piazza was lined with hundreds of wicker rocking chairs where the wealthy would lounge and watch the promenade on Broadway. Just up the street stood the Grand Union Hotel, nearly as large, boasting a 54-piece orchestra under Victor Herbert playing twice daily, and a dining hall that served multi-course feast of terrapin, canvasback duck, lobster, and venison to thousands of guests. For all its glamour, Saratoga symbolized the peak of Gilded Age leisure and its eventual decline. As the new century dawned, Saratoga faced competition from other destinations and changes in taste, but during the Gilded Age, an August in Saratoga was synonymous with high living. Visitors strolled Saratoga's Congress Park or took carriage rides, sipped the mineral waters at ornate spring pavilions, and networked with the who's who of American industry and finance. In contrast to Newport and Saratoga's satin and chandeliers, the Adirondack Mountains offered Gilded Age millionaires a rustic kind of luxury. Up in the wilds of New York, on secluded lakes and pine-scented peaks, the ultra-wealthy built sprawling log estates known as the Adirondack Great Camps. Here, families like the Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, and Morgans could play at being wilderness pioneers, albeit with private chefs, electricity, bowling alleys, and stocked wine cellars at their remote lodges. The Adirondacks had drawn tourists since the 1869 publication of William H. Murray's book, Adventures in the Wilderness, which sparked a flood of city dwellers seeking fresh mountain air. By 1875, there were over 200 hotels scattered across the Adirondack Park, from rustic inns to massive resort hotels like Paul Smith's, a favorite of presidents and tycoons. Regular railroad service reached into the mountains. In fact, Thomas C. Durant, father of the Great Camps movement, built a railroad line from Saratoga up to North Creek, opening the wilderness to tourism. But while middle-class tourists stayed in basic hotels or lean-to campsites, the ultra-rich began to carve out their own private wilderness retreats. These became the Great Camps, compounds of lodges and cabins typically on vast private landholdings by a lake where a wealthy family and their guests could enjoy nature in splendid isolation. They were designed in a distinctive rustic style that somehow still exuded luxury. Logs, rough-hewn timbers, native stone, and even bark were used to construct fanciful lodges, boathouses, and guest cabins, an American take on the Swiss chalet or Japanese pagoda blended with arts and crafts sensibilities. Yet inside these log mansions, you might find Persian rugs and Tiffany lamps. Wealthy owners like the Vanderbilts brought servants and fine china deep into the woods. A great camp estate often included multiple buildings, separate cottages for dining, sleeping, and recreation, connected by winding paths or covered walkways. They were like private resort villages. William West Durant, son of the railroad magnate, pioneered this style. He built some of the earliest camps and sold them to financiers and industrialists. Great Camp Sagamore, for instance, was bought by Alfred G. Vanderbilt in 1901 and became an opulent rustic retreat with its own bowling alley, movie theater, and a staff of guides and caretakers, all camouflaged under a veneer of rough wood and Adirondack twig furniture. Summer life at the Great Camps was about roughing it in comfort. By day, the gentlemen would don flannel shirts and hunt or fish with Adirondack guides or go yachting on the lake, while the ladies might sketch the mountains or picnic on a scenic shoreline. Evenings brought formal dinners, fresh trout or venison served on fine china, and maybe a campfire sing-along or a billiards match in the casino building. This type of communion with nature and rustic luxury leads us to our next destination up in Maine. By the 1880s, a small fishing village on Mount Desert Island, Maine, had transformed into a summer haunt nearly as illustrious as Newport. This was Bar Harbor, which Gilded Age elites turned into a forested paradise of mansions, private clubs, and carriage roads. Cooler and more rugged than Newport, Bar Harbor offered mountain hikes and sailing by day, and glittering dinners by night, a combination that drew the likes of John D. Rockefeller Jr., J.P. Morgan, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and even President William Howard Taft to spend their summers here. Bar Harbor's appeal lay in its dramatic natural beauty. Tall evergreen forest and pink granite cliffs fringe the Atlantic here, with views of sparkling Frenchman Bay. Wealthy vacationers built shingle-style cottages, mansions really, on the slopes and shorelines. Days were filled with outdoor amusements, carriage rides along Rockefeller's meticulously constructed carriage roads, picnics atop Cadillac Mountain, or cruises to spot porpoises in the bay. In the evenings, Bar Harbor society gathered at the Valley Club or the Claremont Hotel for dinner and dancing. The social scene could be quite refined. Bar Harbor attracted artists and writers as well as moguls, giving it something of an intellectual bohemian edge at times. Still, Bar Harbor was unquestionably an enclave of privilege. The island's seclusion made it feel like a private kingdom for its summer colonists. Rusticators, as early middle-class visitors were called, had come to Mount Desert Island since before the Civil War for simple farmhouse lodgings and fresh air. But once America's richest arrived, Bar Harbor's character shifted to upper-crust exclusivity. Tragically, Bar Harbor's Gilded Age glory literally went up in smoke in 1947 when a devastating wildfire swept the island, destroying many of the old estates. But despite this, the area remains a beloved summer spot, now largely as part of Acadia National Park and the town of Bar Harbor, which welcomes visitors of all walks of life. Moving away from the East Coast, the Gilded Age rich also established summer enclaves in the heartland. Lake Geneva, Wisconsin is a prime example, a resort community so laden with baronial mansions that earned the nickname Newport of the West. Located on a spring-fed lake between Chicago and Milwaukee, Lake Geneva became a haven for Midwestern industrialists after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Many Chicago families who had lost their homes in the fire found refuge in this idyllic spot about 80 miles north of the city, and soon decided to build permanent summer homes on the lake's wooded shores. By the late 19th century, Lake Geneva's shoreline boasted estates belonging to the Wrigley's, chewing gum magnates, the Schwinn's, bicycle makers, the Maytags, appliance tycoons, and other Midwestern elites. Enormous cottages with names like Stone Manor and Black Point rose along the water, complete with boathouses, servants' quarters, and immaculate lawns. The community of wealthy summer residents turned the once sleepy town into a glamorous retreat. There were regattas on the lake, polo matches, fancy dress balls at the grand hotels, and leisurely cruises on steam yachts. The lake itself was the star attraction, clear, spring-fed waters perfect for sailing and swimming, though it must be said that in the 1890s, bathing costumes were very modest and swimming was a sedate affair, especially for ladies. One charming legacy of Lake Geneva's Gilded Age is the Shore Path, a walking path that encircles the entire lake, originally established so that the servants and tradespeople could walk between estates. Today, anyone can stroll this path and literally peek into the backyards of Gilded Age mansions, getting a view of the opulent boathouses and gardens. In the upper Midwest, Mackinac Island emerges another beloved Gilded Age summer haven. This small island in Lake Huron, between Michigan's peninsulas, became one of the nation's most favored summer resorts in the late 19th century, thanks to its cool breezes and charming isolation. Wealthy Midwesterners from Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and beyond would travel by lake steamer to Mackinac, no cars allowed, then or now, which added to the peaceful atmosphere. As the big steamships arrived, Victorian ladies and gentlemen would disembark onto a pier bustling with porters ready to whisk their luggage to one of the grand hotels or cottages. They had come to escape the city heat in exchange for an island of horse-drawn carriages, bicycles, and leisurely living. The most famous symbol of Mackinac's resort era is the Grand Hotel, opened in 1887. Billed as America's original Grand Hotel, it was constructed by a consortium of railroads and steamship companies to entice more travelers. The Grand Hotel's 660-foot-long porch became an icon. Each evening, guests in formal dress would sit in the porch's rocking chairs, enjoying the sunset and lake views, often to the accompaniment of an orchestra. The hotel and others like it provided every amenity a Gilded Age traveler could want: elegant suites, fine dining, a saltwater pool, billiards, tea gardens, and more. During the day, guests might take carriage tours past Fort Mackinac and the island's natural curiosities like Arch Rock, or engage in genteel sports, tennis, bicycling on the car-free roads, nature walks, or perhaps a round of golf. By the 1890s, the wealthiest visitors were building their own summer cottages on Mackinac's bluffs, just as they did in Newport. These cottages were not quite the scale of Newport's mansions, but they were certainly Grand Second Empire or Queen Anne-style homes with expansive verandas and stunning views. A social life developed that included afternoon tea at the hotel, sailing regattas on the streets of Mackinac, and nightly dances. But not all Gilded Age getaways were in the East or Midwest. On the West Coast, a simple Victorian vacation style was San Francisco's Cliff House. Perched dramatically on cliffs overlooking the Pacific surf and seal rocks, the Cliff House was a renowned seaside resort restaurant that drew everyone from robber barons to U.S. presidents for a bit of ocean breeze and indulgence. The original Cliff House opened in 1863 as a fashionable outpost where San Francisco's elite could escape the city and enjoy fine dining with a panoramic ocean view. By the 1890s, the Cliff House had a new lease on life thanks to Adolph Sutro, a self-made millionaire and former San Francisco mayor. Sutro bought the property and in 1896 rebuilt it into a fantastical 8-story Victorian castle-like structure. This gingerbread palace, crowned with turrets, gables, and an observation tower, truly became a West Coast icon. Sutro's Cliff House had multiple dining rooms, ballrooms, an art gallery, and even a museum of curiosities. Despite its opulence, Sutro had a populist streak. He made sure his Cliff House would welcome all respectable people, not just the rich. He built a railroad line out to the site, reducing the travel cost to a nickel, and advertised affordable menu options. By offering a seat on the porch and a drink for 10 cents, the Cliff House became a destination for working class and wealthy families alike. This democratization was a bit ahead of its time, and it came with the side effect of diluting the resort's exclusivity. Sundays at the Cliff House were especially popular. Thousands of San Franciscans would take the excursion train or later the trolley out to the ocean beach, enjoy a stroll on the sand or a swim at the nearby Sutro baths, and then dine at the Cliff House while watching the sun sink into the Pacific. The scene circa 1900 was a lively mix: elegant ladies in long dresses and parasols sitting on the beach, children building sandcastles, men in suits and bowler hats climbing the rocks, and above it all, the ornate Cliff House providing a fantasy-inspired backdrop. The Cliff House's story is one of resilience too. It survived the 1906 earthquake, only to burn down in 1907. It was rebuilt in a more subdued neoclassical style in 1909. Though its most extravagant incarnation was gone, the Cliff House continued as a San Francisco institution for well over a century. It's worth noting that there were several other resort communities and vacation destinations spread about the country. From Lake George, which offered accommodations for the ultra-wealthy and the emerging middle class, to trolley parks in remote areas outside of big cities, like the Mackinac Highlands near St. Louis, where a working-class family could board a trolley and ride it all the way out to the countryside for a pleasant day trip. By the time the automobile became common, people were no longer bound to destinations that were accessible by rail lines and ferries. This, of course, saw new spots emerge past the Gilded Age as people could spread out and find their own slices of paradise. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. If you could go back in time and spend a weekend at one of these resorts, which one would you choose to visit? Let me know down below in the comments section. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.